Throughout NBA history, we've seen plenty of dominant NBA teams that have destroyed their competition to reach the NBA Finals. And in the finals, we've seen teams like the 90s Bulls and the 2000s Lakers win multiple championships and put up some impressive finals performances. But not every team that reaches the finals is necessarily a great team. So today, we're going to take a look at the 7 worst finals teams in NBA history. Also, we're going to leave out teams from before the NBA-ABA merger in the 70s, because if not, this video would likely just be terrible finals teams from the 50s and 60s. And if you like NBA videos like this one, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more NBA content. I'm Nate the Hooper, and let's get right to the video. First up for the video is the 2000-2001 Philadelphia 76ers. This team is the best team in this video, but that does not necessarily mean they are a well-structured team. The Sixers won 56 games this year and were led by Allen Iverson. He averaged 31 points, and this season would go down as one of the greatest one-man carry jobs in NBA history. Iverson was essentially the only offense on the entire team, and they ended the season 15th in scoring. The team surrounded Iverson with mainly defensive players and rebounders. The second leading scorer was Theo Ratliff, who only averaged 12 points a game. But Theo Ratliff was traded for Dikembe Mutombo mid-season in a move that did not necessarily improve the Sixers' offense. Nonetheless, the core of Iverson, Mutombo, Eric Snow, and Tyrone Hill advanced all the way to the finals, although they did not get there easily. They won the first round pretty easily, but in the second round, the Raptors took them to 7 games. The Sixers only won that Game 7 by 1 point, and Vince Carter was inches away from making a game winner at the buzzer. Then, in the conference finals, the Bucks also took them to 7 games. However, this game was not as close, and Iverson dropped 44 points in a 17-point win. Then, in the finals, it did not get any easier, as the Sixers were matched up against the defending champion Lakers. The Sixers won Game 1, and Allen Iverson would have some incredible moments in that game. However, they would then go on to lose the next 4 games. Shaq and Kobe dominated the series, with Shaq averaging 33 and 16, and Kobe averaging 25, 8, and 6. This Sixers team just did not have enough firepower to compete with the Lakers, and the franchise has not made a finals since 2001. Next, we have the 2017-2018 Cleveland Cavaliers. This was LeBron James' last year with the Cavs, and frankly, he did not have that much help. Kevin Love was the only other borderline all-star level player on the team, and aside from him, the team was made up of just solid role players. The Cavs were also terrible on defense and were 29th in defensive rating. The Cavs won 50 games in the regular season, and LeBron James dominated with averages of 27, 9, and 9. Then, in the playoffs, LeBron's stats went up, but the Cavs struggled mightily. They almost lost in the first round as the Pacers took them to 7 games. Then, they swept the Raptors in the second round. After that, they had a tough conference finals where the Celtics almost beat them, taking them to 7 games. After this unlikely path to the finals, the Cavs matched up with the Golden State Warriors super team, consisting of Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, and Klay Thompson. This series would be a disaster for the Cavs, and they would be swept, losing every game by double digits except for Game 3. LeBron James was extremely dominant in the series and averaged a ridiculous 34, 10, and 8, but it just wasn't enough. The Cavs team just did not have enough firepower to match up with the Warriors' offense. For the next team, we have the 2002-2003 New Jersey Nets. This was not a bad team by any means, but the fact that they were a finals team highlights just how weak the East was in the early 2000s. This Nets team had a solid core of Jason Kidd, Richard Jefferson, and Kenyon Martin, but only won 49 games this year. Although, they were still able to get the 2 seed with only 49 wins. They had a relatively easy path to the finals, playing the Bucks led by Gary Payton and Sam Cassell in the first round, and then played the Celtics in the second round that had no scoring outside of Paul Pierce and Antoine Walker. Then, they swept a good Pistons team in the conference finals. But once they got to the finals, they met the San Antonio Spurs that had a prime Tim Duncan play one of the best series of his life. The Nets would be defeated in 6 games, and their top players played pretty poorly, with Jason Kidd, Kenyon Martin, and Kerry Kittles all shooting under 40% from the field. All the games were very close in this series, but it was pretty clear throughout that the Spurs would win, and the Nets were just overachievers this season. Next up, we have the Nets team the season before the last one. The 2001-2002 Nets won 52 games and earned the 1 seed. However, in my opinion, this team is worse than the other Nets team, and it shows again how weak the East was in the early 2000s. This Nets team was great on defense, and it had the best defensive rating in the NBA. However, offense was a different story for the Nets, and they had very few scoring options. Their leading scorer was actually Kerry Kittles, who only averaged 14.9 points per game, incredibly low for a finals team. They struggled in the first round of the playoffs and almost lost to the Pacers. But after that, they beat the Hornets and Celtics pretty easily. But when they met the Lakers in the finals, they were completely overmatched. The Lakers had won the last 2 championships, and Shaq and Kobe were eager for a three-peat. In this series, the Nets were swept, and Shaq absolutely dominated, averaging 36 points, 12 rebounds, and 3 blocks en route to Finals MVP. The Nets had a couple of close games, but were unable to contain the Lakers' dynamic duo. The Nets even lost by 23 in Game 2. Jason Kidd played really well in this series, but this Nets team just did not have enough talent to match up with the Lakers. And number 3 is the 2006-2007 Cleveland Cavaliers. Although the 2018 Cavs team did not have a great roster around LeBron James, the 2007 Cavs team was even worse. The best players outside of LeBron James were an aging Zydrunas Ilgauskas, an inefficient Larry Hughes, and Drew Gooden. The Cavs won 50 games this year and earned the 2 seed in the East. In the playoffs, the Cavs were carried by LeBron, who averaged 25, 8, and 8. They swept Gilbert Arenas and the Wizards in the first round, and then beat Vince Carter and the Nets in the second round. In the conference finals, the Cavs played the Pistons, and the Pistons won the first 2 games. But then, LeBron and the Cavs won 4 straight, advancing to the finals. Then, in the finals, the Cavs played the San Antonio Spurs and were completely outmatched. The Cavs just did not have enough star power outside of LeBron James, and their second leading scorer was Drew Gooden, who only averaged 13 points. The Spurs swept the Cavs and played great defense, holding them to under 100 every game. Tony Parker and Tim Duncan proved to be too much, and many of the Cavs players severely underperformed, such as Larry Hughes, who only averaged 1 point in 22 minutes per game. Next up, at number 2, is the 1998-1999 New York Knicks. This Knicks team was led by a 36-year-old Patrick Ewing, and had a solid core surrounding him that included Allen Houston, Larry Johnson, and Latrell Sprewell. The team struggled all year to score the ball, and did not have a player that could take over at will. Due to this, they had the 4th worst offensive rating in the NBA, and were more of a defensive team. The Knicks only went 27-23 this year in a lockout-shortened season, and almost missed the playoffs altogether. But luckily, they snuck in as an 8 seed, where they matched up with the Miami Heat, led by Alonzo Mourning and Tim Hardaway. The Knicks beat the Heat in the first round, giving NBA fans one of the most improbable upsets in NBA history. Then, they had one of the most shocking playoff runs of all time. They swept the Hawks, and then they beat a stacked Pacers team in 6 games to advance to the finals. In the finals, the Knicks matched up with the Spurs and played their dynamic duo of Tim Duncan and David Robinson. And unfortunately for the Knicks, Patrick Ewing partially tore his Achilles in the conference finals, and so he was unable to play in the finals. So now the Knicks' already lackluster offense was missing Patrick Ewing, and Latrell Sprewell would actually be the best player on a finals team. The Knicks' offense struggled mightily in the finals, and the Spurs held them to 79.8 points per game. Latrell Sprewell averaged 26 points a game, and Allen Houston averaged 22. But outside of them, no one averaged double figures, and they would be defeated in 5 games. Although this Knicks team had one of the most unlikely runs in basketball history, they were unable to complete their underdog story, and it would have been interesting to see if it played out differently if Patrick Ewing was healthy. And at number 1 for today's video is the 1980-1981 Houston Rockets. This team had a true star player in Moses Malone, who averaged 28 points and 15 rebounds. But outside of that, the team was nothing special. There were aging players who were out of their prime, such as Rudy Tomjanovich and Calvin Murphy, and then there was Robert Reed, who also had a solid season. The Rockets did not have a good regular season though, and actually had a losing record, going 40-42, making it very weird that a losing team was able to make the finals. The Rockets made the playoffs as the 6th seed, and back in 1981, only 6 teams made the playoffs in each conference. They then met a stacked Lakers team led by Magic Johnson and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in the first round. And due to the playoff rules at the time, the first round was a best out of 3 series instead of a best out of 7. So it was much easier to have an upset in the first round than it is today. Due to this, the Rockets beat this juggernaut Lakers team by only winning 2 games to 1, and every game was decided by less than 5 points. Then, in the second round, they met George Gervin and the San Antonio Spurs. This series went to a Game 7, where the Rockets won by 5 points. Then, in the conference finals, they won in 5 games against the Kansas City Kings. Then in the finals, they played a 62-win Boston Celtics team. This Celtics team was a deep team led by Larry Bird, and 5 players averaged double figures. The Rockets were able to win 2 games in this series, but they also lost 2 games by over 20 points. Moses Malone did his best to will his team to victory, averaging 22-16, but the Rockets were defeated in 6 games. The Celtics were just too well-rounded and dominated much of the series, even though no one averaged over 20 points a game for them. Meanwhile, the Rockets were too top-heavy and did not have enough pieces to match Boston's depth. Although, I would say losing in 6 games in the finals is a successful season for a team that did not even have a winning record. There have been plenty of teams throughout NBA history that made the finals and were completely outmatched. It was interesting to look at these teams, especially the 1981 Rockets and the 1999 Knicks, as they were more so underdog stories than underperforming teams. If there are any teams that you think I forgot to mention, comment below which ones you think I should have included. Anyways, thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this video and want to see more NBA content, make sure to subscribe to my channel.